Let's get right into it. Number 10. Date night at the Dissection. Picture this. You're living in Renaissance Europe and your date suggests a night out. But instead of dinner and a movie, you're going to watch someone get cut open. Public dissections were the hottest ticket in town. These weren't just boring medical lectures, they were full-on performances. They built special buildings called anatomical theaters, built like mini coliseums so everyone could get a good view of the action. And just like concerts today, these events had everything. Live music, fancy seating, and even snacks. The bodies they used were usually executed criminals. It's like they were saying, "Hey, you thought the execution was the finale? Nope. There's an encore." One famous anatomist, Guillaume Rondelet, was so dedicated to his craft that he even dissected his own deceased infant son in front of a live audience. These shows were so popular that artists like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci would show up to sketch. Some of the most beautiful art in history was inspired by people watching bodies get carved up. And this was considered high-class entertainment. Like, "Oh darling, shall we go see the new corpse getting dissected? I heard they're doing the intestines tonight." Number 9. The human hair jewelry craze. Imagine walking into your great-great-grandmother's jewelry box and finding a beautiful brooch made from human hair. Back in Victorian times, people weren't just wearing gold and diamonds, they were wearing their dead relatives. It was a super common way to remember loved ones who had passed away. These weren't just random clumps of hair stuck in a locket either. Skilled craftsmen would clean the hair, sometimes even boiling it, then weave it into intricate patterns. They'd make flowers, geometric shapes, and even tiny landscapes, all from someone's actual hair. Queen Victoria herself was a huge fan of this trend. After her husband Albert died, she started wearing jewelry made from his hair, and obviously when the Queen does something, everyone wants to copy it. But it wasn't just for dead people. Lovers would exchange locks of their hair as tokens of affection. Some pieces even came with cheerful inscriptions like, "Remember you must die," because apparently wearing someone's hair wasn't morbid enough on its own. Number 8. Sewing your dinner. You're at a medieval feast, and suddenly the chef brings out what looks like a creature straight out of your nightmares. It's called a cockatrice, and it's exactly what happens when you let medieval chefs play Dr. Frankenstein with their food. Picture this. The front half of a piglet, sewn together with the back half of a chicken. They literally stitched different animals together to make new ones. This was fancy food for fancy people. The more bizarre your food looked, the more impressive you were as a host. They'd take their needle and thread and carefully stitch these two different meats together. Then they'd roast the whole bizarre creation and cover it in gold foil, because apparently regular sewn-together meat wasn't fancy enough. They'd baste this frankenfood with egg yolks and saffron to make it look even more impressive. It's like they were trying to distract people from the fact that they were eating something that looked like it escaped from a medieval science experiment. And people would actually eat this thing. They'd slice it up and serve it like it was totally normal to eat a sewn-together meat monster. Number 7. Beauty was a black smile. Imagine walking down the street and seeing everyone with pitch-black teeth. You'd probably think there was some kind of zombie outbreak going on. But in ancient Japan, having black teeth was actually the height of fashion. They called it ohaguro, and women would carefully paint their teeth black using a special dye made from iron and other natural stuff. It wasn't just about looking good. Black teeth meant you were mature and ready for marriage. Meanwhile, over in England during Queen Elizabeth's time, people were also rocking the black teeth look, but they weren't doing it on purpose. Sugar was super expensive back then, so only the wealthy could afford it. Without toothbrushes or dentists, their teeth turned black from all the sugar. Instead of being embarrassed, they showed them off. Having black teeth meant you could afford sugar. It was like walking around with a Rolex watch, but in your mouth. Even Queen Elizabeth herself reportedly had teeth so black that foreign ambassadors would write home about it. Poor people would sometimes paint their teeth black to look rich, kind of like buying fake designer stuff, but for your mouth. Number 6. Renting a pineapple to look rich. Imagine being so desperate to look rich that you'd rent a fruit. Well, that's exactly what your ancestors did in the 1700s. Back then, pineapples were the Lamborghinis of the fruit world. These spiky status symbols were so expensive that a single pineapple could cost what would be thousands of dollars today. But people weren't even eating them. They just put them in the middle of their dinner table to show off. There were actual pineapple rental services. Imagine being the guy running that business. "Yes, sir, that's our premium model, freshly polished, only displayed at 3 parties this week." Sometimes the same pineapple would make appearances at multiple dinner parties around town. So you might be bragging about your fancy centerpiece while your guests are thinking, "Hey, wasn't this the same pineapple at the Johnson's party last week?" People got so obsessed with pineapples that they started putting pineapple designs everywhere, on their furniture, their door knockers, even their bedposts. Number 5. When all the toddlers wore dresses. So, you're a time traveler visiting the 1800s. You see a bunch of toddlers running around in fancy white dresses. You think to yourself, oh, what cute little girls. Well, half of them are probably boys. Up until the early 1900s, all toddlers wore dresses, regardless of whether they were boys or girls. And this wasn't some weird fashion trend or early gender experiment. It was all about the poop. Think about it. When your toddler needs to go, they need to go now. No time for complicated buttons or fancy pants. Just lift the dress and problem solved. These dresses were like the ancient version of those modern onesies with the snap buttons. Easy access for cleanup. When a boy was finally ready to wear pants, it was a huge deal. They called it breeching. Like your kid just got promoted from diaper duty to pants person. Some families even threw parties to celebrate their son's first time wearing pants. Some parents even believed keeping boys in dresses would protect them from evil spirits. Apparently, demons back then were really confused by clothing choices. Number 4. The Jell-O dinner party. Imagine walking into a fancy dinner party in the 1950s and seeing an entire fish floating in Jell-O. This wasn't some weird prank or a cooking disaster. This was actually the height of fancy dining. These wobbly creations were called aspics, and they were basically the Instagram food of their time. But this wasn't your strawberry Jell-O dessert. We're talking about meat-flavored gelatin holding everything from eggs to vegetables to entire turkeys. Picture serving your guests a clear, jiggly dome with a whole chicken suspended inside, like some kind of prehistoric insect trapped in amber. Kings and emperors would show off their wealth by having these quivering masterpieces at their banquets. The fancier the ingredients floating in your meat Jell-O, the more important you were. Before modern refrigeration, this was actually a way to preserve food. But then it turned into this weird flex where people competed to see who could make the most ridiculous Jell-O creation. By the 1950s, Americans had taken it to a whole new level of crazy. They started putting hot dogs in lime Jell-O, tuna in orange Jell-O, and basically anything else they could think of. Number 3. The midnight wake-up party. Imagine waking up at 2 a.m., and instead of panicking about insomnia, you just casually walk to the living room to hang out with your family. Before electricity and the Industrial Revolution messed up our sleep schedules, people had this thing called segmented sleep. They'd go to bed around 9 p.m., sleep for about 4 hours, then wake up for a couple of hours before going back to sleep until morning. This wasn't like when you wake up at 3 a.m. wondering if fish get thirsty. This was a planned break in the middle of the night. Rich people would use this time to write letters or have deep conversations about life. Poor folks would do some quick house chores. Some folks used this time for more intimate activities. Historical records show people sneaking out during their middle wake to meet up with lovers. It was like Tinder, but with more risk of stepping in horse manure. There's a creepy story from 17th century England. It's about a girl whose mom got up during her first sleep and was lured away by mysterious visitors. She was never seen again. The whole thing only changed when factories came along. Suddenly, everyone had to be up at the crack of dawn to work, and these midnight parties became a thing of the past. Number 2. When kids ruled the church. Imagine you're living in medieval times, and you walk into church one Sunday, but instead of seeing the usual old guy in fancy robes, there's a kid running the show. This was called the boy bishop tradition, and it happened every December. They'd pick some random choir boy and basically give him the keys to the church. This kid would get dressed up in full bishop gear, fancy hat, special staff, the whole deal. He'd strut around blessing people, giving sermons, and basically living his best life. Meanwhile, the real bishop had to step down and watch this kid take over his job. And this wasn't just some cute little show. This kid had actual power. He could give orders, lead processions, and even collect money from the townspeople. And his choir boyfriends got to dress up as priests and join in on the fun. The whole thing was based on this idea that the mighty shall be brought low and the humble raised up. Basically, they were saying, hey, even a kid can do your job. This tradition was so popular that it spread all over Europe. Of course, some stuffy church officials tried to shut it down, but people loved it so much that it kept going for centuries. Number 1. Wearing a wig to fight lice. Picture this. You're a fancy nobleman in the 1700s. You've got wealth, power, and a head full of tiny roommates that won't pay rent. Head lice were basically the unofficial royal family of Europe back then. These little parasites were so common that even kings and queens were scratching their heads more than they were ruling their kingdoms. So what did our ancestors do about this itchy situation? They'd shave their heads completely bald, which gave the lice nowhere to live. Then they'd slap on these massive powdered wigs that looked like they'd stuffed a sheep on their head. When the wig got infested with lice, they could just boil it. Imagine that. You're at a fancy dinner party, and Lord Fancy Pants casually mentions he's got his hair in a pot of boiling water back home. So next time you see a portrait of some stern-looking judge or nobleman in a powdered wig, just remember he's probably thinking, "At least my scalp isn't itchy anymore." That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.